Hello, Manal. We're just gonna wait a minute or two to give people a chance to log on and jump online. Hello, Jayanta. Hello to everyone. I'm just gonna give it another minute or so. Mornings can be a bit busy and complicated, right? And we have people joining us from all over the world most of the time. Hello, John. So I like to give a little grace period. Hello, Mateas and Karuna. Hello to everyone. We'll start in about a minute. Give people time to log in and settle in, get comfortable, say hello in the chat. Hello, Edward. So we're about to get started. Maybe you can get ready with your little cup of coffee or chai, water, settle in, find a nice seat. Hello, Eon. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So before I start, I'll pay my respects to the Buddha. Namo tase bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhase. Namo tase bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhase. Namo tase bhagavato arahato Samma Sambuddhase. Hello to everyone out there. So today I'm going to be sharing with you most of Digha Nikaya number 5, the Kūṭadanta Sutta. So if you want to follow along, I'm going to be using the Bhikkhu Bodhi version, Digha Nikaya number 5, Kūṭadanta Sutta. Right? Or you can use any parallel, go on Sutta Central and go ahead and find it. So I would encourage you to follow online if you can at home. And, one of the things that I really enjoy about the Digha Nikaya, it's that, it really has a wide basis that it covers, like a panoramic view of the Dhamma and Buddhism. And there's this, emphasis on the social dimension of the Dhamma, right? Many of us take it as a personal practice, right? Like, I'm studying the Dhamma, I'm meditating, like I'm keeping the precepts, right? It's like all these things revolving around us, but there's a very social dimension, right? To all of it. We look at the Brahma Viharas, that's very social. We look at the Sila, that's a social dimension to it too. So we'll find that there's many social dimensions to it, and we can find some of these kind of Dhamma Buddhist social theories or ideals more elaborated, and we can find examples in the suttas, especially in the Digha Nikaya, where it seems like it's dedicated or directed towards many of the suttas towards lay people and towards people that are just beginning to understand the Dhamma, and how this would apply in their everyday lives, or at least how they should live their lives, right? Instead of saying like, don't do this, do that, kind of giving context, right? maybe not being so direct of what you should and shouldn't do, but teaching you how to practice the Dhamma through a story, right? So I want to share a story with you today that's going to teach us, how this vision, this Dhammic vision of society, how a Buddhist-based or Dharma-based society can be practiced. And it's about the principles, not literally we can't go back in time, and live in an agrarian society or with kings and queens and things like that. But the basic principles behind this story will show us, how the kind of uh, policies and perspectives and uh, yeah, actions that we need to take in order to share the Dhamma. When we think about sharing the Dhamma, most of the time we're thinking about, like me, like reading a sutta. But I think the best way that we can share the Dhamma is through our actions and through our speech, to live the Dhamma, to embody the Dhamma, uh, to walk the Dhamma in our everyday lives, and organize our lives around the Dhamma. Uh, so, yep, my hopes by sharing this story is that you'll pick up some of these aspects of the social dimension, the social dimensions of the Dhamma. So once again, it's Diga Nikaya number 5, and I'm going to start. Here they have it translated as a bloodless sacrifice. And I'm going to go mostly through the Bodhisattva story, and then I'll end once it brings us to the time of the Buddha. All right, so it starts with the Buddha. He reflects on a previous life, which he's not telling the other people there that it's his previous life. He just kind of talks about it like, oh yeah, this just happened, and then once it gets to the part where um, the other people there say, well, it seems like the Venerable Gautama is talking about, like, he knew that he was there because he was there. He's not saying like, I heard this, then we'll stop there, because then he goes into all the sila, right? The uh, lower, middle, and higher training of sila, of the precepts, and there's where I'm gonna stop, because all the other suttas in the Digha Nikaya in the beginning, in the first part, kind of just go over this topic of sila, which is very important, but I really want to focus on this kind of story and the social implications of this story. Thus have I heard, once the Lord was staying through Magadha with a large company of some 500 monks, and he arrived at the Brahmin village called Kanumata, and there he stayed at the Ambalatika Park. Now at that time the Brahmin Kūṭadanta was living at Kanumata, a popular place full of grass, timber, water, and corn, which had been given to him by King Saniya bin Bisara of Magadha as a royal gift and with royal powers. And Kūṭadanta planned a great sacrifice. 700 bulls, 700 bullocks, 700 heifers, 700 he-goats, and 700 rams were all tied up to a sacrificial post. And the Brahmin and householders of Kanumata heard say, the ascetic Gautama is staying at the Ambalatika, and concerning the blessed Lord Gautama, a good report has been spread about. The blessed Lord is an Arahant, a fully enlightened Buddha, perfected in knowledge and conduct, a welfarer, knower of the worlds, unequal trainer of men to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, a Buddha, a blessed Lord. The chanting that we always do, right? The Buddha Vandana, iti piso bhagava ariham samma sambuddho vicha charana sampanno suketo lokavidu anuttero purisadhamma sarati satta deva manusanam buddho bhagavati. So that's, what he just said. He proclaims this world with its gods, maras, and brahmas, the world of ascetics and brahmins with its princes and people. Having come to know it by his own knowledge, he teaches a Dhamma that is lovely in its beginning, lovely in the middle, and lovely in its ending, in the spirit and in the letter. And he displays fully perfected, thoroughly purified holy life. And indeed, it is good to see such arahants. And at that, the Brahmins and householders, leaving Kanumata in great numbers, went to Ambalatika. Just then, Kūṭadanta had gone up to the veranda for his midday rest. Seeing all the Brahmins and householders making for Ambalatika, he asked his steward the reason. The steward replied, "Sir, it is the ascetic Gautama, concerning whom a good report has been spread about. This blessed Lord is an Arahant," and it goes again through the Buddha Vandana, the Itipiso Bhagava. "That is why they are going to see him." Then Kūṭadanta thought, "I have heard that the ascetic Gautama understands how to conduct successfully the triple sacrifice with its 16 requisites. Now, I do not understand all this, but I want to make a big sacrifice. Suppose I were to go to the ascetic Gautama and ask him about the matter." So he sent his steward to the Brahmins and householders of Kanumata to ask them to wait for him. And at that time, several hundred Brahmins were staying at Kanumata, intending to take part in the Kūṭadanta sacrifice. Hearing of his intentions to visit the ascetic Gautama, they went and asked him if this were true. "So it is, gentlemen. I am going to visit the ascetic Gautama." So during this time, it was very popular to do these blood sacrifices, sacrificing animals. This was the way of creating merit, karma, good karma in those days. So, according to our understanding of what was going on at that time, uh, Brahmanism was very much focused on ritual actions and producing uh, good karma, meritorious actions through rituals and purification through rituals, right? And so there was this big focus on doing these big pujas, we would call nowadays, right? Like these big pujas, these big sacrifices, these big rites and rituals, big ceremonies, in order to produce good karma and to purify oneself and to pay respect to the gods. And also to bring the community together and to show kind of your status in that community too, right? So uh, it covered both the spiritual uh, dimension of life and the more kind of everyday mundane uh, part of life. And here we're going to see how the Buddha very skillfully kind of tries to uh, reinterpret, right, or redefine what a sacrifice is, what a puja is, and how to make merit. This is a clear example of the Buddha's skillful qualities we're going to see up ahead, where the Buddha kind of works with the ideas that people have at the time, right, and tries to redefine them. And this is something that you see throughout this Digha Nikaya. And I'm reminded of also of the Sigalabhata Sutta with Sigalaka, where he sees this young man bowing to the six directions, right? Uh, and then the Buddha says, I think it says like in the noble one's way, right? In the Arya Dhamma, we have another way of doing it that is more fruitful, right? So he doesn't tell this young man to stop doing what he's doing and that it's wrong, and to give up rituals, but he shows him another way. And instead of actually vowing to the six directions, he tells him about mother and father, about family, about friends, about employers and employees, about religious people and religious practitioners. So the Buddha redefines it, reinterprets this kind of practice that they already had at that time. And we're going to see the same thing happen in this kind of blood sacrifice, how the Buddha is going to be able to redefine, reinterpret this practice in a more harmonious, wholesome, compassionate, and wise manner. So back to the story. So now they're going to say, "Sir, do not visit the ascetic Gautama." Right? So there's this very influential Brahmin who wants to visit the Buddha, and some other Brahmins are saying, "Sir, do not visit the ascetic Gautama." And then it kind of repeats the same formula that we kind of went through in the previous one. They start talking in the previous suttas, where they start talking about why they shouldn't visit the ascetic Gautama. And then the other persons will start saying the reasons why they should visit the ascetic Gautama. So it's a bridge right here, and we'll continue. "This being so, it is not proper for the Reverend Kūṭadanta should visit the ascetic Gautama, but rather the ascetic Gautama should visit him." Then Kūṭadanta said to the Brahmins, "Now listen, gentlemen, as to why it is fitting for us to visit the Reverend Gautama and why it is not fitting for us to visit the ascetic Gautama. And again, now the rebuttal, right, of why is the proper reason. He goes, oh, because he's a Katiya, because he came from a good family, etc., etc. A rebuttal to all the reasons why the other Brahmins were saying that he shouldn't visit him. Then it continues, the ascetic Gautama has arrived in Kanumata and is staying at Ambalatika. And whatever ascetics or Brahmins come to our territory are our guest, he is beyond all praise, right? So here we go. We hear Kūṭadanta praising, right? One, kind of like validating what, the value of the Buddha and why it's proper. And then going as so far to say that he is beyond all praise, right? That he is beyond these mere kind of everyday praises that people give to others. And it continues. On hearing this, the Brahmin said, "Sir, since you praise the ascetic Gautama so much, then if he were to live 100 yojanas from here, it would be fitting for a believing clansman to go with a shoulder bag to visit him. And sir, we should all go visit the ascetic Gautama." And so Kūṭadanta went with a large company of Brahmins to Ambalatika. He approached the Lord, exchanged courtesies with him, and sat down to one side. Some of the Brahmins and householders of Kanumata made obeisances to the Lord. Some exchanged courtesies with him. Some saluted him with joint palms. Some announced their names and clans, and some sat down to one side in silence. Sitting to one side, Kūṭadanta addressed the Lord. Venerable Sir, Gautama, I have heard that you understand how to conduct successfully the triple sacrifice with its 16 requisites. Now, I do not understand all this, but I want to make a big sacrifice. It would be well if the ascetic Gautama were to explain to me. Then listen, Brahmin, pay proper attention, and I will explain. Yes, sir, said Kūṭadanta, and the Lord said. So now we're going to get into the story, which is really the emphasis of what I'm trying to share with you, right? The social applications, the social dimension of the Dhamma. So we're going back in time. Brahmin, once upon a time, there was a king called Mahavijita. He was rich, of great wealth and resources, with abundance of gold and silver, of possessions and requisites of money and money's worth, with a full treasury and granary. And when King Mahavijita was musing in private, the thought came to him, I have acquired extensive wealth in human terms. I occupy a wide extent of land, which I have conquered. Suppose now I were to make a great sacrifice, which would be to my benefit and happiness for a long time. And calling his minister chaplain, he told him his thought. I want to make a big sacrifice. Instruct me, Reverend Sir, how this may be to my lasting benefit and happiness. The chaplain replied, Your Majesty's country is beset by thieves. It is ravaged. Villages and towns are being destroyed. The countryside is infested with big brigands. If Your Majesty were to tax this region, that would be the wrong thing to do. Suppose Your Majesty were to think, I will get rid of this plague of robbers by execution and imprisonment, or by confiscating threats and banishment. The plague would not be properly ended. Those who survive would later harm Your Majesty's realm. However, with this plan, you can completely eliminate the plague. To those in the kingdom who are engaged in cultivating crops and raising cattle, let Your Majesty distribute grain and fodder. To those in trade, give capital to those in government services, assign proper living wages. Then those people, being intent on their own occupations, will not harm the kingdom. Your Majesty's revenues will be great. The land will be tranquil and not beset by thieves. And the people, with joy in their hearts, will play with their children and will dwell in open houses. And saying so it be. The king accepted the chaplain's advice. He gave grain and fodder, capital to those in trade, proper living wages, and the people with joy in their hearts dwelt in open houses. So here's one of the things, right? The king wanted to do this big event, right? And in order to do this big event, it's not going to be free. So how are you going to go about this? Well, collecting from the people, right? Taxing them or taking it from them, or maybe if you're nice, asking them for it. But here the chaplain minister points out that, there's parts of the kingdom that are in poverty and where a lot of criminal activity is going on. And if the king were to pull resources, right, pull resources from this community and have this big lavish kind of ceremony, I mean, one, the people are already coming from a place of scarcity. They don't have enough resources. It's just going to make the situation worse if you take more resources from them. And then imagine the kind of resentment that would arise if you see kind of like the king indulging, having this huge event, or the leader having this huge event when you were just sent into a more difficult situation. Uh, so the answer here, is that in society, when we come across these problems, uh, instead of trying to criminalize things and pulling resources from those communities, instead is more about bringing more resources to that community, and not not having these kind of lavish events when there's people who are in poverty, right, and who need these resources, and that the funds should be directed to those who are in need. And what's interesting here is that the solution to crime and violence is not punishment, right? But it's to tend to care for, uh, to help heal and to share and to be compassionate is the answer to overcome these societal problems, right? Here there's kind of another underlying message, just telling us that people are not inherently evil, right, or inherently bad, but that people are behaving this way due to their conditions, right? The causes and conditions of that environment is leading people towards these unskillful states of mind, unskillful speech and actions, um, and that the way to help people, you know, um, be free from these unwholesome states and unwholesome actions is to actually be generous, right? To practice dana, uh, and through the practicing of dana, uh, the 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 uh, the practicing of dana will facilitate and will bring about the practice of sila, right? Because they're breaking sila, and the way to have them practice sila is not by punishing them or threatening them that they're going to go to hell or jail, or that they're going to get lashed and do all these horrible things. Uh, but it's through showing them loving kindness and compassion through our actions of giving and doing, practicing generosity and dana. So we all know that it's like we say sometimes dana, sila, bhavana, right? The three practices for lay people, and that's what we see here in this sutta. I mean, right here we're starting with dana right away, and then sila is, there's three aspects to sila here: the higher sila and the regular sila. That's later in the sutta. But to begin with, in order to avoid, not only to avoid and to prevent, but to restore sila, we need to practice dana. We need to practice generosity, which comes from a place of nekama, which comes from a place of abhyapada and abhihimsa, right? Renunciation, a place of non-hatred, non-ill will, or we can think about it, a place of generosity, a place of loving kindness, a place of compassion. So now back to the story. After the king has said, okay, let's go ahead and give food and all these resources to the people. Then King Mahavijita sent for his chaplain and said, I have gotten rid of the plague of robbers. Following your plan, my revenues have grown. The land is tranquil and not beset by thieves, and the people with joy in their hearts play with their children and dwell in open houses. Now I wish to make a great sacrifice. Instruct me as how this may be done for my lasting benefit and happiness. For this, sir, you should send your katiyas from town to town and country, your advisors and counselors, the most influential Brahmins and the wealthy householders of your realm, and say to them, I wish to make a great sacrifice. Assist me in this, gentlemen, that it may be for my lasting benefit and happiness. So here's interesting. After the king redistributes these resources and helps people, the people are wealthy. And because they are wealthy, they're able, the king is now able to get some of those extra resources, because the people are in a good place now where they do have abundance, and pull from the abundance part, right, without having it have a severe impact on the people's lifestyle. So I found this very interesting because I remember a couple of years ago there was like a this UN report on poverty and all these other kind of issues that are going on in the world, and it said, you know, one of the main ways to help us in this ecological catastrophe that we're in, right? This ecological catastrophe with pollution and all these kind of other environmental impacts. It suggested that as people get wealthier, as people increase their wealth, right, from like objective poverty, uh, people start thinking more long term, right? So when people don't have that many resources, they're just living the day. I'm just going to try to get the most happiness or excitement out of my life in this moment because tomorrow's not guaranteed. And a year, 10 years from now, it's impossible to think about it when you're just living meal to meal. But as people's wealth increases, they start thinking more long term, right? Like, well, now that I'm just not living day to day, maybe I'm living week to week or every 2 weeks or month to month from paycheck to paycheck, or they start gaining even more and they have like some sort of uh, career or stable income. They start planning for years, right? Like with my children, I'm going to save money for them to go to college or I'm going to buy a house. Uh, People then also tend to care more about their environment around them because they know they're going to be there for a while, right? Uh, so they begin to tend and care for the environment in which they see themselves being a part of that environment, right? The problem is that they don't see themselves being part of that environment because they might die the next day or that same day, or they don't see a future for themselves and their family. But once they do start seeing a future for themselves and their family, they start taking care, right, of the place because they're going to be there. Uh, so what this report said is that the solution to these ecological problems and many other problems is to make those people who are not wealthy wealthy, right? So it's very interesting, right? It's kind of here like in this with the solution to the crime and all these other things that were going on in the world is not to punish people, right? Is not to shame them or anything else, but instead it is to make them wealthy. And that's what the king did, right? He distributed resources and made them wealthy. And once they were wealthy, they had access, right? They were coming from they had a abundance of resources. Then he was able to pull from uh, those resources, but he's going to do it in such a way where he's not taxing them. This is the next part that we're getting to, where he has to send out Brahmins and Khatiyas that are very influential. He's going to invite people, those people who want to share and contribute in this meritorious uh, event, can if they want to, right? And in a way where it doesn't bring harm. We're going to see how the Buddha also kind of puts in there that we shouldn't be sacrificing animals. So we continue on with the story. Um, The king agreed and did so. Sir, let the sacrifice begin. Now is the time, your majesty. These four assenting groups will be accessories for the sacrifice. King Mahavajita is endowed with 8 things. He is well born on both sides. And then he goes into explaining all the good qualities of why Mahavajita is a good king, kind of like they did with the Buddha, like why the Buddha is worthy of things, but on a very mundane level, right? About caste and that they're intelligent and handsome, etc. Of irreproachable birth, he is handsome, of no mean appearance. He is rich, with full treasury and granary. He is powerful, having 4-branched army that is loyal, dependable, making bright his reputation among his enemies. He is faithful, giver and host, not shutting his doors against ascetics, Brahmins and wayfarers, beggars and the needy. A fountain of goodness. He is very learned in what should be learned. He knows the meaning of whatever is said, saying that this is what that means. He is a scholar, accomplished, wise, competent, and perceives advantage in the past, the future, or the present. King Mahavajita is endowed with these 8 things. These constitute the accessories for the sacrifice. The Brahmin chaplain is endowed with 4 things. He is well born. He is a scholar, versed in mantras. He is virtuous, of increased virtue, endowed with increased virtue. He is learned, accomplished, and wise. He is the first or second to hold the sacrificial ladle. He has these 4 qualities. These constitute the accessories to sacrifice. Then, prior to the sacrifice, the Brahmin chaplain taught the king of these 3 modes. It may be that your majesty might have some regrets about the intended sacrifice. I am going to lose a lot of wealth. Or during the sacrifice, I am losing a lot of wealth. Or after the sacrifice, I have lost a lot of wealth. In such a cases, your majesty should not entertain such regrets. Then prior to the sacrifice, the chaplain dispelled the king's qualms with 10 conditions for the recipients. Sire, there will come to the sacrifice those who take life, right? People who kill, those who abstain from taking life, those who take life, so will it be to them. But those who abstain from taking life will have a successful sacrifice and will rejoice in it, and their hearts may be calm within. There will come those who take what is not given, and those who refrain from it, those who indulge in sexual misconduct, and those who refrain from it, those who tell lies, and those who refrain from it, indulge in calumny, harsh, vigorous speech, those who are covetous, and those who are not, those who harbor ill will, and those who do not, those who have wrong views, and those who have right views. Those who have wrong views, it will turn out accordingly. But those who have right views will have a successful sacrifice and will rejoice in it, and in their hearts may be calm within. So the chaplain dispelled the king's doubts with these 10 conditions. So the chaplain instructed the king, who was making the great sacrifice with 16 reasons, urged him, inspired him, and gladdened his mind. Someone might think King Mahavajita is making a great sacrifice, but he has not invited his Khatiyas, his advisors and counselors, the most influential Brahmins and wealthy householders. But such words should not be in accordance with the truth, since the king has invited them. Thus the king may know that he will have a successful sacrifice and rejoice at it, and his heart will be calm within. Or someone might say, King Mahavajita is making a great sacrifice, but he is not well born on both sides. But such words should not be in accordance with the truth. Or someone might say his chaplain is not well born, but such words would not be in accordance with the truth. Thus the chaplain instructed the king with 16 reasons. In this sacrifice, Brahmin, no bulls were slain, no goats or sheep, no cocks or pigs, nor were various living beings subject to slaughter, nor were trees cut down for sacrificial posts, nor were grasses mown for the sacrificial grass. And those who are called slaves and servants or workmen did not perform their tasks for fear of blows and threats, weeping and in tears. But those who wanted to do something did it. Those who didn't wish to do it did not. They did what they wanted to do and not what they didn't want to do. The sacrifice was carried out with ghee, oil, butter, curds, honey, and molasses. Then the Brahmin, the Khatiyas, etc., the ministers and the counselors, the influential Brahmins, the wealthy householders in towns and country, having received sufficient income, came to King Mahavajita and said, We have bought sufficient wealth. Your Majesty, please accept it. But gentlemen, I have collected together sufficient wealth. Whatever is left over, you take it. At the king's refusal, they went away to one side and consulted together. It is not right for us to take this wealth back to our own homes. The king is making a great sacrifice. Let us follow his example. Then the Khatiyas put their gifts to the east of the sacrificial pit. The advisors and counselors set out to theirs, the south, the Brahmins to the west, and the wealthy householders to the north. And in this sacrifice, no bulls were slain, nor were any living beings subject to slaughter. Those who wanted to do something did it. Those who did not wish to, did not. The sacrifice was carried out with ghee, oil, butter, and curds, and honey and molasses. Thus there were these 4 assenting groups, and the king Mahavajita was endowed with 8 things, and the chaplain with 14 and 3 modes. This Brahmins is called the 16-fold successful sacrifice in 3 modes. So it's interesting. The sacrifice initially was going to be the king taxing and pulling resources away from people, doing this big ceremony all by himself, right? Not inviting anyone, for his own benefit only, and killing a bunch of animals. But then the way the Bodhisattva is teaching him is, to instead of pull resources from the community, give to them, right? And instead of conducting the ritual by himself, to conduct it, to invite others to participate in this meritorious action, right? And instead of killing, there's like a harmless avihimsa, a harmless sacrifice, which everyone basically just has like sweets and desserts, right? It's like a dessert party instead of killing animals. So it's very interesting, and we can see how this is kind of like the Buddha sending a message to the lay people, to the upasikas, dayukas, on how to conduct a proper dana. Like, how would you run a dana, right? Like for the sangha dana, or support the monks in the temple by doing these meritorious deeds, right? One, sharing the benefits of giving, and then that we should give, and to be generous is to be good, right? That's kind of motivating people to do it. Another one is that it should be non-violent, right? And we shouldn't force people to do it, forcing people to come to the temple and clean the temple and feed the monks if they don't want to. And this is very important for parents. Sometimes, they kind of force their kids to come, or other people to come, and they're not happy being here. I mean, they don't necessarily hate it, but they're kind of like, they don't want to be here. And then that kind of mood comes into the whole scene and kind of taints the whole ceremony, the whole giving aspect, because someone is kind of suffering. There's a little bit of pain in them, a little bit of dukkha, and they should be happy and rejoicing. And then the other one is that it should be that the dana should be free of like killing and harming living beings, right? So those are the three things there about giving, about inviting others to give with you, and to give in such a way that doesn't cause suffering to oneself, to others, and obviously to other living beings like animals. At this, the Brahmins shouted loudly and noisily, "What a splendid sacrifice! What a splendid way to perform a sacrifice!" But Kūṭadanta sat in silence, and the Brahmins asked him, "Why did you not applaud the ascetic Gautama's fine words?" He replied, now we're back into the time of the Buddha, right? Not in the Bodhisattva story. "It is not that I do not applaud them. My head would split open if I did not. But it strikes me that the ascetic Gautama does not say, 'I have heard this,' or 'it must have been like this,' but he says, 'it was like this or like that at that time.' And so, gentlemen, it seems to me that the ascetic Gautama must have been at that time either King Mahavijita, the lord of the sacrifice, or else the Brahmin chaplain who conducted the sacrifice for him. Does the Reverend Gautama acknowledge that he performed, or caused to be performed, such a sacrifice, and that in consequence of death, after the breaking up of the body, he was reborn in a good sphere, a heavenly state?" The Buddha: "I do, Brahmin. I was the Brahmin chaplain who conducted that sacrifice." "And Reverend Gautama, is there any other sacrifice that is simpler, less difficult, more fruitful, profitable than these threefold sacrifice with its 16 attributes?" "There is, Brahmin." "What is it, Reverend Gautama?" "Whatever regular family gifts are given to virtuous ascetics, this constitutes a sacrifice more fruitful and profitable than that." So this is interesting, right? We heard the account of this huge sacrifice, right? This huge puja, this huge dana being done. And then the people during the time of the Buddha, they ask him, well, is there a better way and more efficient way, right, to do this? And he goes, yes, right? Giving to well-deserved Brahmins and ascetics and religious people, right? Giving to those worthy of giving. That is a better way to practice, to do such sacrifice. And then we're going to go through it goes through a long list of things to do. It goes through the the minor sila, right? And the middle ones, and it goes through the longer ones. And then it goes through the whole awakening process to reaching full nibbana. And then the Brahmins praise the Buddha, etc., etc. So yeah, there's so many things that we can learn from this sutta, right? Like, I'll repeat again. One is that the antidote, right, or that the response to bad moral conduct, right, to criminality and to poverty is not punishment, right? And it's not taking things away from them, right? Like, oh, you were misbehaving, now I'm going to take these things away from you also, right? That kind of punishment either. But instead is to be generous and to give, right? To give more to them, to bring them up to a decent standard of living. and to help them be successful, and to help them reach a level of abundance, where these people are able to share, without having to take something from them, and in such a way where they don't become jealous or resentful of the people who are administering that society, right? Uh, Also, the benefits of giving is so important, right? The benefits of dana and how to conduct a proper dana ceremony, right? That we should invite other people, as I said earlier, and that it should be free from any harm, and that you know we shouldn't try to do it by ourselves. We should have others, as I said earlier, about helping, inviting other people to do dana with us. And we also see here the kind of like, what was I going to say? The social dimensions, right? The direct applications to society of like dana and sila and all these other, like, compassion and loving kindness. Sometimes they seem very abstract, right? Or they seem like very individual practices. But here we can see how these very fundamental Buddhist practices or Buddhist ideals are being put into practice, right? In the beginning, they kind of seem kind of like counterintuitive, uh, or kind of just like, oh, well, that's just wishful thinking. But the Buddha's inviting us, right, to extend our practice of dana, sila, bhavana, to extend our our practice of cultivating metta, karuna, mudita, and upekkha, to extend all these wholesome states of mind and all these wholesome practices, and apply them into our everyday things, and change the way in which we do everyday things, to change the way to change our livelihood, to change our lifestyle, to change even the way that we practice our traditions, right? To have our traditions from our culture be informed by the practice of the Dhamma, and to have also our society also be informed by the Dhamma practices. So I think that's, a real important aspect of the Dhamma that shouldn't be overlooked, uh, and shouldn't seem like, oh, well, that's like, I don't know, getting political, or like, or something like that. But it's very important that we extend our practice to and the teachings of the Buddha, the Dhamma, into every dimension of our life, just to create the best, conditions for us to alleviate suffering and eliminate it, and for our own benefit, for the benefit of others, and for the benefit of all. Okay, so now I see a lot of stuff in the chat, and if you have any questions, any comments, anything you wanted to share, go ahead and put it in the chat now, and I'll answer it. And I'll say hello to the people that I didn't get a chance to say hello to earlier: Richard and Char Leslie and Luisa and Amaranta and Sud and Melinda. Hello to all of you. Is there any questions or comments that you have in regards to this sutta? I'll give you a minute or so to type it, and it takes a little bit of time to type it in there. Questions, comments? Well, what do you think about that? Oh, here we go. Is the king here our mind, and I guess the Brahmin minister our intellect? So the Buddha is recalling. I mean, the Brahmin asks the Buddha, right? You are either the king or you were the chaplain. And the Buddha says, yes, I was the chaplain. So the Buddha very much is saying, no, this actually happened. Like, and I was the chaplain at that time. So at least the way it's being presented in the sutta, this is an actual thing that happened some time ago. Right? It's not it's not being presented as a metaphor, or it's not it's not like some sort of psychological metaphor. It's not being presented in that way. It's being presented as as an actual event, as a previous life of the bodhisattva. Any other questions or comments? I'll take this time to invite everyone to when you have a chance, go through the Digha Nikaya. I know it's a little bit long. The suttas are long and they're repetitive, but I think Bhikkhu Bodhi did a pretty good job at abridging it where it repeats too much. And you'll get to see, a lot of the more everyday kind of applications and societal applications of the practice of the Dhamma, how we can incorporate it into our society and into our lifestyle and into the way we interact with others and how we organize ourselves and how we can inform our practices, our ceremonies, our traditions, our rites that we already come from with due to our own ethnic background, and kind of try to find a way to practice them in a more wholesome way, in a way that's more aligned with Dhamma. And if we start reading these suttas in the Digha Nikaya, you'll start seeing kind of this interpretive process that the Buddha went through, where there was things at that time, and the Buddha, instead of telling people, well, stop doing it, that's foolish, he kind of redirects it, right, and redefines it, and helps people and encourages people to continue these practices and to continue doing the things that they're doing, but in a more harmonious, wholesome way in which it is aligned with Dhamma. Okay, here we have something. Manal, it is interesting to me how other forms of Buddhism and Hinduism as well cultivated greater adherence to rites and rituals. When in suttas such as this one, it clearly shows how things like this are not beneficial. Well, I don't think it's saying that they're not beneficial, right? Clearly, the king does go through with the ritual. He does the ritual, and the Buddha says that it was beneficial, right, and that a lot of people were happy. But he puts it in its proper place, right? So it is beneficial, it is good, but there are more meritorious practices that you can do, like giving to ascetics and Brahmins who are worthy, right? It's better than doing this big festival. So what I see the Buddha doing a lot is getting these rites and rituals, making them wholesome, and then showing people other ways of doing things that are even more wholesome than these more like materialistic based practices, right? Like pujas and things like this. So there is very much a place for pujas. I mean, you'll see it here at Buddhist Insights. You'll see rituals in my temple and Sarachandra Buddhist Center. You go to temples in Japan and Korea and Vietnam and Thailand, huge festivals, right? And who knows how many thousands, if not millions of dollars are spent on rites and rituals. But the main thing is here, you know, that money, those resources, where did they come from? Were these donations given in the proper way, coming from blameless, harmless sources? And are they being applied in such a way that they're also blameless, harmless, and beneficial, right? So it's really about our intention and the results of whatever we're doing. So we can do rituals, but we need to be very conscious of the impact that it's having and our intentions behind them, right? The rituals can just be a tool, like language is a tool. When I say, may all beings be well, happy, comfortable, and peaceful, you know, uh, that's just a concept, and in every language, the sound sounds different, you know. In Spanish, I would say que todos los seres estén bien felices, cómodos y pacíficos. I mean, it's just like a intellectual, conceptual ritual that I repeat. And if I just get stuck on the words and repeat them like a blind mantra, then it doesn't mean anything, right? Just like if you come to the temple and you give out of people wanting to see you, that you're such a great person, and I want people to know that I'm a great giver, and I want to be famous, and I want everyone to praise me. You're coming from a place of greed and a place of egocentric tendencies when you're giving dana to the temple. Then you're going through the motions. The motions are the same, but the intention is very different, and the impact that it has on your life is very different. But if when I'm saying may all beings be well, happy, comfortable, and peaceful, I'm just not saying it, but I'm actually feeling it, and my mind is free from greed, hatred, and delusion, and thinking about others, then those words are very useful. In the same way as if you come to the temple and you give, and when you give, you come from a mind of giving, and you may bow to the Buddha statue, and you might light candles and do all these rituals here in the temple, but your mind is in a wholesome place. So it's really about the chetana, the intention, and also us checking before, during, and after the impact that this practice is having in our lives and in the lives of others. Oh yes, there's a sutta where the Buddha says if a person, even for one moment, right, is able to encompass the area under a tree, right, under the tree branches under one tree, with loving kindness, it's better than giving a meal for 100 years, like giving meals for 100 years 2 or 3 times a day. And it says like something of rice. It says what kind of meal it is. It says it would be more meritorious just for one moment of mind in the metta. One metta moment of mind would be more beneficial than giving for 100 years food. So yes, metta is more beneficial, but it's more abstract for us, right? We don't necessarily see the impact of it in one moment, because the next moment we might be angry again, or we might be jealous, or we might see that people are still starving in the world, or we don't see the direct impact. So these more tangible, grosser levels of the practice help us see right away the benefit, where in these more subtle practices, although they're more powerful, they're not as apparent, right? So I would say that these kind of more ritualistic, ceremonial, grosser levels, tangible, materialistic practices give us something to grab onto, so we can see the direct results of our practice in this moment, and then we can infer, like, okay, I'm able to see that this practice leads to good things. Therefore, in a similar way, when I practice metta, I may not see it right now, but I know that good actions have good consequences. So this good action, this good mental moment in my mind, will also have results. So I think we need to have like a multi-pronged approach to our practices of giving, right? So we can give material things, we can give time, we can give energy, we can give the gift of dharma, we can give the gift of fearlessness, which is like metta, karuna, mudita, and upekkha, and just kind of have all these different dimensions of our practice to be like a well-balanced Buddhist practitioner, right? I used to do a lot of I used to be into physical fitness before I became a monk. Then I would see some guys with like really big arms, but like their chest and their legs wouldn't be developed, right? Or a really big chest but skinny legs. Uh, so we also kind of want to have a well-rounded Dhamma practice, and including our dana practice, our giving practice should also be well-rounded, right? Where we're not like the guy in the gym with a very thin body and just big arms, right? So we kind of want to take a approach dana from many different perspectives and dimensions when we can. Thank you for your question so much. Okay, Edward Clark. I've become aware that the compassion I feel for living beings is shallow. I give friends and family, but not to strangers. How can I make a breakthrough? The best way is just to do it, to practice, right? Like the best way to get big muscles is just to do the exercise, right? The best way to learn a new language is just to keep practicing the language. And it requires effort, right? And we may come across challenges and obstacles like you notice right now. I'm doing it, but it doesn't feel good, right? I'm not feeling it. Well, in the beginning, when you go to the gym and you work out, you don't automatically see the results. Actually, you feel worse, right? You're like sore and you don't want to go, and you feel like embarrassed because you don't really know what you're doing. Uh, but over time, we know that it'll give benefits. So the best way to do it is just to practice. Practice in actions like you've been doing, giving, practice in words by being kind, practice in thought, right? Uh, Generating wholesome thoughts, thoughts of loving kindness. And when you see a thought of hatred or greediness, okay, this is not useful. This is not in line with Dhamma. And you put it to the side, and also practicing on the cushion, right? Meditating, loving kindness. So we just have to keep practicing and practicing, and trust in the practice. So just doing it, right? And I think the physical practice of doing good things, at least in my own practice, has been more beneficial than just, when I sit in metta, but bringing the practice of metta into my everyday life. So the more you actually physically do it and and tell yourself, I'm going to speak from a place of metta, of loving kindness and compassion, and then start speaking. Or before you say something unwholesome, you think to yourself, I'm not going to speak this way. I'm going to speak from a place of metta and karuna. That's going to change, your literally the way your body and mind are wired, the patterns that they follow. So just do it. Keep doing it. Trust the process. Just like if you were learning a new language or you're trying to get good at a certain physical activity, practice makes perfect, is what they say. Sud says, Bhante, is metta more beneficial because it makes us closer to Nibbana, or is it in the sense that it will just make your future better? I mean, both. Both, because metta has a direct connection to heavenly state, right? That's why it's called Brahma Vihara, right? Dwelling in the divine, or in the godly place or heavenly place. So yes, the practice of metta does lead to a good state in this moment, in a future moment, a good rebirth, or even being reborn in the Brahma realm in a heavenly state, right? If you practice metta. But also, it builds this kind of altruistic, selfless attitude, right? And the more selfless we are, the closer we become to Nibbana, right? So like even you get two benefits here, right? You get like a more worldly, mundane benefit of kind of like in this moment, in the next moment, in this life, in a future life. And then you also get the ultimate benefits, which is like getting closer to Nibbana, right? So they're both in there. It's beneficial, and it's beneficial for the world too. You'll have less hatred, less greediness, and you'll be less violent and resentful. So other people will benefit from your practice too. So it has many attributes, many dimensions of benefit to it. Oh, I didn't know you were watching me. Thank you. Uh, Bhumika, Edward, one for Bhante. I will work on my metta muscles. Yeah, let's get some metta. We can start a metta gym, right? Metta muscle workout plan, and exercise your metta and loving kindness and altruism and sympathetic joy and all those wholesome qualities. Well, we've come to the end of our time today, friends. Thank you so much for joining me so early in the morning. If you're in the U.S. or in the Americas, anywhere, and also thank you for joining me and spending this time with me wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much. These kind of programs can't happen just by myself. There's so many people that make these kind of events possible, like all the monastics here, like Aya Brahmavara, Bhante Sudaso, and Aya Soma, etc., and all the people who support Buddhist Insights and Empty Cloud. Because of them, we're able to host these kind of beautiful programs. Thank you for all of you that are participating, because without the questions and comments, this would be a very boring video, right, to share if you were not here asking these questions. And I also like to thank all the people who maybe watch the videos later, right? Maybe you're watching this a few days, a few weeks, a few years later. Thank you for tuning in and giving us the views and liking and sharing and subscribing and all those things. You're also helping, all those unknown people who are helping us with increase our our algorithmic value on social media and YouTube. Thank you for giving us your time, and thank you for giving us the click, and thank you for everything that you do. I just want to thank everyone that's involved in this process. And tonight, Monk Chat, I hope to see you there. If tonight with another monastic, I think it's going to be me and Aya Brahmavara. So until then, or whenever I see you next, or in a future life, may you be well, happy, comfortable, and peaceful. Sukhi Hotu. Bye bye, everyone.